Patriotism. That's what happened to Russian schools today. Instead of a regular first bell celebration, the school year started with a raising of the Russian flag. And from this moment on, this ritual will take place every week. Moreover, students will have regular lessons called talks on important topics that are targeted at encouraging love to motherland, of course. Children and teenagers will be told about the greatness of Russia, traditional values, and so-called special military operation. In other words, propaganda has now officially come to our schools. That is quite clear why these lessons are introduced on a regular basis and all over the country now. The attitude towards the war in Ukraine is completely different from what Kremlin was expecting. Some miss the Soviet times and still cherish the dream about the restoration of the great empire, while others, what a surprise, rather than living in empire, would prefer a fair, democratic society. In fact, I believe that this is a true patriotism. Indeed, a real patriot is a person who cares about their country, and without freedom and democratic values, Russia will never be happy and prosperous. But for Putin regime, patriotism is something completely different. It's when citizens march in unison and believe in every word that propaganda says on TV. Young people almost do not watch TV. They mostly use internet to get information, and as a rule, they tend to doubt all that authorities say. That's what youth is about. Seems Kremlin realized that one cannot build a bright imperial future with this kind of young people. Today we will discuss what the new school propaganda looks like, how to resist it, and why this initiative will anyway fail. It is not a secret what exactly awaits Russian school children. All the materials for these classes are published in open sources. Here, for example, the so-called teacher's newspaper explains the ritual of flag raising. The ceremony includes the lining up, formal carrying of the flag, and choir anthem singing. United forever. Okay, I remember that you told me not to sing. And this will be happening every week, outdoors during autumn and spring, and indoors in winter. Those who have ever been to the pioneers' camp know what these everyday lineups look like. A very clear reference. The main tool of Russian propaganda at school will be those talks on important topics. An extra class where kids will be taught patriotism. There are even guidelines for teachers on how to conduct these classes on the website Unified Program for School Education. It is an official source where teachers get tips on how to prepare for the lessons. Starting from the 12th of September, the ideological pep talks start. The topic of the lesson sounds harmless: our country, Russia. If your child is in elementary school, you shouldn't worry yet. They will mostly discuss the love to family, nature, birch trees, and other romantic things. But already in the fifth form, students will be involved in geopolitical topics. The quotes from Pushkin and Lomonosov about love for motherland suddenly transform into the discussion on the meaning of special military operation. And at these classes, the student will hear all the same that propaganda tells us on TV about the threat of NATO that is planning to establish their military bases in Ukraine, about Ukrainian regime that maltreats the Donbass citizens. At these classes, school children will learn about new heroes of Russia and their patriotic acts. For example, Captain Alexander Romanov, who, as it's written on the website, has captured a group of Ukrainian nationalists, and a Sergeant Marat Kalikov, who carried his wounded friend away from the battlefield. As an introduction to the discussion on special military operation, the high school students, 16-17 years old, are offered to play a game called History of My Country, where the task is to match the event with the date. There are absolutely no peaceful events in this game, only wars and battles. Seems that there was nothing else happening in the history of Russia. The authorities decided that the patriotism with an emphasis on military sector is exactly what modern kids need. There is plenty of good Soviet movies about Soviet schools, and for sure our parents have a lot of good memories about their school teachers. But school system in USSR was an authoritarian institution driven by motto "Teacher is always right." Students were expected to be diligent, remember the dates and retell the paragraphs. And no one was encouraged to show creativity or express their personal opinion on the material that is studied. It didn't surprise anyone, the whole society was like that. But then USSR collapsed. But school remained the same. Yes, the United National Exam was introduced. Now it's being widely criticized though, and there are even ideas of removing it. By the way, I have a video about why this idea is very bad. But the system in which teacher lectures, humiliates and punishes students, and students just have to obey, is still the same. One recent research showed that 80% of Russians, it's crazy number, have problems with self-esteem, and they connect it with the trauma from communication with school teachers in the past. Of course, it's not always like that. There are many good schools in Russia, but not that many. And to get their kids past the selection process, an average student has very few chances to get there. He will go to a regular local school where, like it was in the USSR, some regular teacher will tell him off for a wrong haircut or clothes. And where there is always one right answer, even in humanitarian subjects. And this is not the only problem. Every time when elections are held, we hear the stories about the school teachers who are involved in ballot rigging or simply rewrite their reports. In 2017, after Navalny's film He Is Not Demon to You, about the corruption schemes of Dmitry Medvedev, numerous demonstrations took place in Russia, in which many young people also took part. Then teachers shouted at students, told them off for participating in demonstrations, and even insulted them. Of course, it's horrible and absolutely unacceptable. But in our situation, there might be a blessing in disguise. Propaganda can only affect the school kids if it comes from the beloved and respected teacher. Teachers who falsify the election results and behave unethically have no moral influence on kids. Everything they say will be considered just another dull lecture and shouldn't be even paying attention to. In the late USSR, people lived in two parallel realities. In one reality, they and the whole country officially moved towards the bright communist future, tried to overfulfill their 5-year production plans, and criticized the global imperialism. In another hidden part of their life, they listened to rock music, bought foreign jeans in the black market, and dreamt to have at least a tiny opportunity to have a look at what's happening in the so-called decaying Western world. I'll remind you that those were people who lived with propaganda since kindergarten. They had no alternative sources of information, no internet, everything that modern children and young people do have. When in the middle of the 80s, Mikhail Gorbachev announced policy of glasnost, openness, he didn't invent anything new. He just publicly announced something that people already discussed in the kitchen. As soon as the Soviet citizens had the opportunity to express their doubts out loud, the era of the USSR was over. It was the same with repressive laws and censorship introduced this spring. Vladimir Putin started the war expecting victory and nationwide approval. He didn't get any of that. Now he is looking for a pillar his regime can lean on. His regime seems to be invincible, but in fact it lacks support. There was a questionable but still solid ideology behind the USSR propaganda. But even this wasn't enough to save the regime. Putin's propaganda has nothing behind it. It's a pie without filling, a wrap without a candy inside. Children will never believe in it. An internal disagreement is already a big deal in Russia. Many school kids nowadays know their rights much better than we did at their age. They know that even if they can't object openly, the teachers pressure them by threatening. It's not a reason to change their point of view still. It's not a reason to blindly agree. And this ability of young people to stick to their own opinions means a lot, and perhaps in the future it will help us significantly. And when the whole class at school starts to argue with the things that are told to them, it's great. I'm sure we will see the same this school year in Russia as well. See you tomorrow.